leading the charge for my team, Joe Mixon, who every time he's out there just goes 100 yards and a touchdown. Literally every week that he finishes the game, he goes 24 for 106 and a touchdown. He's able to do that in a game that they lose. It's not like he was a game script merchant in this one, Matthew. I mean, how many running backs would you take the rest of the way over Joe Mixon? Like, it's Saquon, Derrick Henry. There's not many others who are immediately
Kyren Williams, and
he's a top 5 running back.
There's no question he's a top 5 fantasy running back. Didn't get any targets in this game, which is a little surprising. His first game with 0 targets.
He got 16.6 points.
But it didn't even matter, which is crazy.
Yeah. Shout out to Rodgers, by the way. His best bet yesterday was over 20.5 rushing attempts for Joe Mixon, which is just such a crazy number. And oh, by the way, it cashed.
Yep.
So shout out to Connor. 24 rushes, as you mentioned, the 106 rushing yards. He also gets into the end zone. You can run on the Jets, and so that's exactly what they did with Joe Mixon. Now, I think it's going to get a little tougher coming up. Detroit at Dallas, home to Tennessee at Jacksonville. Those are 4 good run defenses. I mean, the Jags actually play, believe it or not, pretty good run defense. For as bad as they are, Jacksonville is actually a top 12 run defense over the past month, right? Again, and we know how good Detroit is. Dallas isn't a good run defense. That's the only one that's the one. But Tennessee, that's the one thing they do well as well. At least on the defensive side of the ball. They're a better defense than they get credit for. They're actually the 9th best run defense over the last 4 weeks. So, but yes, I agree with you. Joe Mixon, if you're thinking about trying to trade for him or you are fielding trade offers for him, he's a top 5 fantasy running back, and I think if you were to draft today for the rest of the season, there's no way you get out of the first round with Joe Mixon still being available.
Absolutely not. Not with a guy who's rushing for 100 yards every game this season except one. Scored a touchdown in every game this season but one. He's having his best year of his career, and he's in year 8 right now.
Yep. He looks great, and the problem is, Jay, that because Joe Mixon has been so effective, it's made the passing game suffer. It's another tough game here for C.J. Stroud, 11.5 fantasy points. Over his last 3 games, he's averaging under 10 fantasy points.
Yeah, and I think with Stroud, there's something like 11 for 30, 191 yards against the Jets defense that isn't the Jets defense of last year or the year before. It's been exploitable. You've seen the games that guys like even Russell Wilson have been able to have against the Jets. And Lawrence, I think that with Stroud, I think that the offensive line hasn't been, I don't think, a strength of the team. He gets sacked 8 times last night. And I just think that he's starting to kind of feel that inferred pressure. And it's like he missed some big plays last night. As good as the Jets defense did play, thought Stroud left some money on the table.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, the passing game's just not there. He ran for 59 rushing yards last night. If it wasn't for that, he has almost nothing as far as fantasy points goes. But this is the last 2 out of 3 games he's put up like these. These are the numbers that Anthony Richardson's been putting up. He's putting those up, and now
wasn't good last night.
And it's looking more consistent, right? You hate to not have Stephon Diggs out there. You hate to not have Nico Collins out there, but coming into this season, C.J. Stroud was considered one of the better quarterbacks in the league. So this is kind of the time where you want to see the quarterback take over, lift up the whole team, but that's Joe Mixon right now.
We had C.J. Stroud on the preseason hate list. He was a bit of a fade for me and for others based on where he was going ADP. One of the arguments against him, though, there were 3 arguments against him. One was that we thought they were going to be more balanced on offense and that they wanted to run the ball, and that's proven itself out. We talked about how Devin Singletary the second half of last year for the Texans had such a heavy workload. So that's played itself out with Joe Mixon this year, and he was on the preseason love list, right? So that's worked out. We also thought that teams would catch up with him. I don't know if that's the case. But we didn't think Stroud would be running or throwing as much. But we also said this is a guy that doesn't run. Yeah. So if there is one thing you want to sort of hang your hat on, he had 59 rushing yards. It was his season high in rushing yards. So at least now most of it felt like they weren't design runs. They were just running from pressure. The pressure had broken down. And he was running from pressure. But just the fact that he has that in him, that he's not just quickly throwing away, that he was open to sort of tucking and running, maybe gives you some hope there. Again, as we mentioned, home to Detroit, at Dallas, home to Tennessee, at Jacksonville. So their offense should get a lift if they get Nico Collins back next week, but certainly it's not the Texans of last year.
And I'll say, too, those 4 games they got coming up, they could lose every single one of those games.
Yep. Absolutely.
I've been saying it this whole year. They've not been convincing. They've credit to them for being able to win these games, but they've not been convincing. All the bad plays that the Colts had versus them. They won by 3 points.
Yep.
Like they were given a touchdown before the half. They won by 3 points. So we kind of been seeing this out of their offense as a whole. Their defense is good. They got one of the top defenses, and you saw that last night too, right? Until the Jets got going, but it's just not working for them specifically in the passing game right now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, any team in the NFL can lose to any other team, but the Titans and the Jags are teams the Texans need to win. Those should be winnable games. If they lose to Detroit, no one's going to panic. That game, by the way, Sunday Night Football in Houston, Texans, Lions at the Texans. We will actually be in Houston, by the way. Fantasy football pregame. So just something to keep in mind there. Sunday, November 10th, we will be at an Applebee's in the Houston location. More details on that next week, but just a heads up for our friends in the Lone Star State. Last thing on this game for me, guys, I just want to sort of bring it back. I kind of want to go back to the Jets for 1 second there. Aaron Rodgers, very quickly, since Davante Adams was traded, is averaging almost 17 fantasy points per game. He has 3 touchdowns in this game. Honestly, should have had 4. The Malachi Corley play is just like
I think that was a reverse, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they were going to but
it was behind, so they would have counted.
It wouldn't have counted. You're right.
Yeah.
But still, the fact is that he's played well, and as we just talked about, Cardinals, Colts, by Seattle. I think Aaron Rodgers is back on sort of the QB2 streaming radar as we get into this bye weeks. I do think potentially a viable, 12-ish type quarterback here. And the only weird thing with Breece Hall, like if you have him, you're going to starting him. But he had only 4 targets in this game, 2 for 11 in the passing game. He's had under 15 receiving yards in 4 of the past 6 games. It's just sort of weird, the lack of passing game usage for Breece Hall, because that was one of the arguments coming into the season was this guy can be Christian McCaffrey. Yeah. And they haven't used him that way.
But you know what, though? You made a point about this way earlier, like right before week 1, is that the quarterbacks that they had last year for the Jets, like a guy like Tim Boyle, who's one of their quarterbacks, he's going to check
Lord
down.
of the dumb off.
Yeah, he's going to check down more often than an Aaron Rodgers. Now, Aaron Rodgers is picky with his throws. He's looking for something that's he ain't looking to throw no incompletions and mess up the stats, right? But still, like a guy like Tim Boyd, and now you have Davante Adams too to add to that. If Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams are nearing double-digit targets every game, this is probably how it's going to be for Breece Hall.
It is. I don't know if there's a fantasy takeaway. You're still rolling them out there every single week, obviously based on the usage and the talent, but just maybe lowering expectations for him. It's a weird one, just how inconsistent the passing game work has been.
Yep. One last thing on this game, Matthew. Tank Dell, he gets right. He goes 6 for 9 for 126 yards, has that massive 50-yarder towards the end of the game to really clean up his stats. Now, the expectation is that Nico Collins will be back for that game against Detroit. Where do you think Tank Dell, with Stephon Diggs out for the season, does he slide into being a low-end wide receiver 2, someone that you can start with confidence each week?
I probably think he's a little bit more flex, probably more of a wide receiver 3 for me, because I still think it's going to be up and down. Nico Collins is an alpha, and he's going to get his, and obviously they want to focus on the run game. Joe Mixon is going to touch it 20 times, if not more, every single week. But it is nice that after a very slow start to the season, Tank Dell has sort of stabilized a little bit very quietly, at least 13 fantasy points in 3 of the past 4 games. No Stephon Diggs. That opens up a decent amount of target share. As we talked about it, right? Lions, Cowboys, Titans, Jaguars. 4 defenses in a row that you can throw on, and that honestly the Texans are going to need to throw on. Certainly the first 2 against the Lions and the Cowboys. So, I don't think Tank Dell's out of the woods just yet, but certainly – if ever there was a game that Tank Dell was going to have a good one, it was this with no Nico and no Diggs and negative game script, and he produced. So you like to see that going against the secondary of the Jets. Yep. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.